first round of the 2019 NFL draft is in the books, and that went exactly as we all thought, right? I mean, because everyone knew the Raiders were going to take Clelin Ferrell, and then the Giants would do whatever the Giants did. But the point is, the NFL draft fell in such a favourable way that the Philadelphia Eagles and Howie Roseman were able to strike early and notch a top 10 talent at pick 22. The Eagles had a sneaky suspicion that the Houston Texans may be on the cards to snatch the player that the Eagles wanted, and Howie Roseman must have some incredible foresight for how this draft was going to play out, because he got it right again. Not only did he trade back last year to acquire Dallas Goedert and snatch him away from the Dallas Cowboys, but now he's been able to move up and poach Andre Dillard, an offensive tackle from Washington State, away from the Texans. Now, the downside to this was that the Texans then immediately struck when they were on the clock and took Titus Howard, a project tackle projected to be a mid-round early on, then rose up boards like there's no tomorrow and ended up sneaking into the first round. But his production instantly would not have been that of a first rounder. He's far more of a developmental talent, and the Eagles certainly needed to reinforce the wall once Jason Peters does decide to hang up his cleats. Now, would this pick have been different? The Miami Dolphins were somehow able to take Christian Wilkins, and there was a report that the Eagles were trying to trade up to 13 to get that player. They had a deal in place according to a couple of people, and then the Dolphins just went, nah, and they took Christian Wilkins. And you've got to feel like, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, that the move to re-sign Timmy Jernigan just hours before would have played into that. Had they not brought Timmy Jernigan back, maybe they would have offered more capital. Maybe that pick they offered would have been a round higher. You just don't know. It's all speculative, but I feel like that Timmy Jernigan signing could have well been the catalyst for the offensive line pick. So who is Andre Dillard? Well, he started 39 games at left tackle for the Washington State Cougars and did very, very well. Now, the big thing to note here is that he may well be the best, at least most productive, pass blocking offensive tackle in this year's draft. You don't even have to look at Pro Football Focus for those numbers either. If you look at the sack from 2016 to 2018, it goes from 7 to 2 to 1, which tells you at the very least that Dillard is improving every single season, that he's coachable, and that those techniques and fundamentals are being worked on each season that he plays the game. Bizarrely, last season he actually took more pass blocking sets than any NFL offensive tackle, and that's including the postseason, that's including whatever. That's a bit mad, isn't it, considering that college traditionally play less games. And on 722 pass blocking snaps, he only allowed 15 quarterback pressures, which is simply staggering. But Andre Dillard, in my opinion, along with the opinion of many others, is by far and away the best pass blocking tackle in this year's draft. But what does this mean for the Eagles? Well, straight away they've now got a question on their hands as what they do with Halapoulivaati Vaitai. I said on this week's episode of The Outside Insider that I didn't feel like they needed to replace Vaitai right away. But Jordan Mailata's still a wild unknown. It was important to find a bridge between the two, because in the event that both Lane Johnson and Jason Peters are unable to play for whatever reason, an instance that's happened on a couple of occasions over the last couple of years, the Eagles need to have a backup ready to jump in, and I'm not sure Mailata is there just yet. Finding someone between the levels of Mailata and Vaitai would have been my hunch, and that's where guys like Yodny Kajust comes in during the 3rd and 4th round of this draft. But instead, the Eagles saw the opportunity to go up and get a top 10 talent off their board. Howie Roseman said just moments after the pick that this was a top 10 talent on their draft board. It's not often you get the opportunity to trade up, remaining inside the 20s and claiming that player. So it's a rare moment for a rare kind of player, and that reinforces this offensive line. Now, does this mean that Halapoulivaati Vaitai is on the move? I don't think so, because if Lane Johnson goes down or something does happen on that other side, you want to know that you've got a tackle that can play both sides, and Vaitai has proven that during his time with the Eagles. Obviously, he does have trade value. I think the drop-off in tackles from round 1 and below is quite substantial, especially after round 3. And the need for competent backups in the NFL is higher than ever. If you just look at what Minnesota did, for some reason they took a center. Why kind of reinforce the tackle position when you could just get Garrett Bradbury? I don't know. You've got to feel like Vaitai would have some incremental trade value. But if you move him now, then you're back to where you started. Because then you've just got Andre Dillard, who has no NFL experience just yet, and then Jordan Mailata on the other side of the bookend. So you're going to kind of cut your nose to spite your face. You may well coop back some compensation. To me, it just doesn't make sense at this moment in time to trade Vaitai. He's cheap, he's cheerful, you know what you get, and he's given us no real reason to worry about his production at the NFL level. Yes, there's been some wobbly games along the way, but hasn't every offensive lineman. I think Vaitai, given the scenario when he's got help from the tight ends and from the guards, has performed very well on both bookends. Just remember to that NFC Championship game. But Jason Peters, the reality of the situation is he's going to be 38 years old next season, and he's coming off the back of 2 injury-plagued seasons. They needed to find a long-term solution. And if we're to project what this Eagles offensive line may look like in 3 years, okay, so 2022, bear with me here. Andre Dillard left tackle, Matt Pryor left guard, Isaac Seumalo centre, Brandon Brooks right guard, Lane Johnson right tackle. And that's 3 years away. How many people can say their offensive line in 3 years would look as good, if not more promising, than it does right now? Despite being 315 pounds, Dillon ran a 4.96 40-yard dash time, which is ridiculous, frankly. The man is super athletic. There's going to be a huge film room on him coming up a little bit later during the week, along with all the other draft prospects that the Eagles take on. The other thing to note here is that Dillard stood out at the Senior Bowl, and that has of course become a breeding ground for Philadelphia Eagles talent. Look no further than Carson Wentz for a prime example of that. So the Eagles fell in love with him early on. They just didn't think they'd be in a position to get him. And if you look at the shape of this team, whether it's running back, wide receiver, defensive end, defensive tackle, even safety, there's no real position where if they didn't draft a player in this year's class, you'd be at a significant disadvantage. There's no real massive weakness on this team. Sure, there are positions of priority. I would say safety is a massive one. I would say slot receiver is going to be a big one, as is running back. But I would say that if the Eagles went today into an NFL season, they would certainly be a playoff team, especially given that they're now going to face Daniel Jones twice a year. So it just makes so much sense to acquire a top 10 talent that took more pass blocking snaps than any FBS level, any NFL level tackle, allowed 15 pressures, that is freaky athletic, has some of the smoothest fundamentals there. Is he a good run blocker? That's the only question. Wazoo run a very complicated, very funky offense, but we haven't seen him run block. That's like saying, can Liam have a 38.9 inch vertical? Well, you haven't seen it, so don't knock it until you've seen it. At the end of the day, I think Dillard has got a lot to offer, and with Jeff Stoutland, who has become one of the NFL's finest offensive tackle development coaches, the ceiling is ridiculously high. Yes, there is a slight age concern that he's going to be 24 years old this year, but at the end of the day, this is someone that's body is now well molded to the position. The ceiling is still high. There is a reason that Dillard's sacks totals every year have gone from 7 to 2 to 1. You may not like the pick. It's not Marquise Brown. It's not sexy. It's not a running back. It's not a safety. He won't jump out the screen on metrics or Pro Football Focus on a game day. But the fact of the matter is, the Eagles have shored up their offensive line. They've found the long-term heir to the throne in Jason Peters. Halapoulivaati Vaitai was drafted in the 5th round a couple of years ago. And you can't expect someone to go from a 5th round pick to a franchise left tackle, replacing a legacy by a future Hall of Famer. It just doesn't work like that. Last time the Eagles took a tackle in the 1st round, it didn't pan out too badly at all, did it, Lane Johnson? So you look at this pick, 6'5", absolute behemoth, but moves around like an interior guard. There's going to be a film room coming, but I love the pick from a logical standpoint. I would have loved the Eagles to go up and get Christian Wilkins. I would have loved them to maybe wait and pick up a tight end based on my very outsidish theory on the podcast recently, but day 2 is going to be just as interesting. And the best part of all of this is the Eagles got a day 1 talent, a top 10 talent, without having to give up one of their 2nd round picks. They lose a 4th and a 6th. Big whoop. I can see them using one of those 2nd round picks to move back, especially given how there's been no run on defensive backs yet whatsoever. So that is a wide open area of opportunity, and I feel like the Eagles could capitalise there early, wait for the running backs to pick up towards the end of the 2nd round, and arm themselves with a 3rd round pick. But what do you think, guys, of the Andre Dillard pick? We're going to have a profile a bit later on. We're going to have a film room next week along with all the other draft prospects. If you're not following already, Philly Sports Network, at Philadelphia SN, at Liam Jenkins 21 on Twitter. We're covering the draft throughout the weekend with articles, with breakdowns and so much more, so make sure you're following along and let me know what kind of content you want to see. Do you want film stuff? Do you want a profile on the player? Do you want reactions? Do you want grades? What is it? Let me know down in the comments, guys, and make sure to stay tuned to Philly Sports Network. From myself, Liam Jenkins, I'll see you next time.